Today, we're going to take a really fascinating journey into the invisible rules that govern nature. We are looking at the chain of life. It's this deeply interconnected system of energy transfer that literally surrounds us every single day, yet it remains almost entirely invisible to the naked eye until you know exactly what to look for. So, let's make the invisible visible.
All right, let's dive right in. Picture this familiar sight, maybe something you'd stumble upon near a quiet pond or a slow moving river. Right there in the center, perched intently on a branch hanging over the water, is a kingfisher. Now, it's an absolutely beautiful bird, right? It's got that striking blue plumage and a very sharp, purposeful beak. But take a close look at its posture. It's not just resting up there, it is watching. It is deeply, intensely focused on the water below. So you gotta ask yourself, why is this specific bird sitting on this specific branch staring so intently into the water? What is its main food? You see, every single physical trait of this creature is actually an evolutionary solution to a fundamental problem, finding the right fuel to survive. So deduce this from the scene we're looking at. What exactly is it waiting for down there in the ripples?
Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. The kingfisher lives in burrows on riverbanks or near ponds specifically to catch fish, and this establishes a really foundational biological rule for us. A creature's habitat is directly tied to its diet. The problem is survival, the solution is catching fish, and the resulting behavior is living exactly where the fish are. It's a direct, unbroken line of cause and effect.
Now let's see how this builds. We just looked at a bird whose entire existence revolves around catching fish. But let's flip the script for a second. Think about animals like goats, deer, or rabbits. Here, we see a completely different strategy for survival. These are plant-eating creatures. They feed exclusively on parts of plants. They don't need sharp fish-catching beaks or the endless patience to stare into a pond, right? Their food is stationary. It's growing right out of the earth. So we're already seeing a massive division in how energy is acquired. You have those who eat plants and those who eat other creatures.
Section 1, Building a Food Chain.
Okay, so we've looked at individual diets, but as we know, nature doesn't operate in isolated little bubbles. Energy actually travels dynamically from one creature to another. Look at this bustling pond habitat. It is absolutely teeming with life. We've got a crane standing tall in the water, a crow on a branch, a dragonfly buzzing around. Down below, there's a frog on a lily pad, a snake slithering in the grass, a grasshopper, a crab, a turtle, a snail, and fish swimming beneath the surface. I know it looks kind of chaotic, but there is a hidden, highly organized system of energy transfer at work here. Every single creature you see feeds on some other organism. Nothing exists entirely independently.
Let's actually trace the first literal path of survival hidden within that pond. We can map it out in clear steps. Step 1, it all begins with a plant. Step 2, small fishes feed on those plants. Step 3, large fishes come along and gobble up the small fishes. And finally, step 4, the crane feeds on the large fish. This is a linear, step-by-step transfer of food and energy. The energy created by that very first plant travels straight up through the small fish, into the large fish, and finally sustains the crane. This straight line of energy transfer, that is exactly what we call a food chain.
But hold on, let's look at that exact same pond and build an alternative sequence. Step 1 is still the plant. Step 2 is still the small fish eating the plant. But at step 3, instead of a large fish, a frog eats the small fish. And then at step 4, the crane eats the frog. Now, this is really fascinating. It demonstrates that a single energy source, like that small fish, can lead down entirely different paths. The energy from that initial plant branches out in multiple directions, depending entirely on who manages to get to the small fish first.
Section 2, the complex food web.
So we've just seen two completely different straight chains originating from the exact same place. But as we kinda hinted out with those branching paths, nature is rarely just a simple straight line. Living beings depend on one another for food, and this interrelationship among them is what we call the food web. Honestly, this is the real aha moment of our explainer, because when you take all those individual, straight-line food chains we just built and overlap them, they interlock. Because let's face it, a crane doesn't only eat frogs, and a frog certainly doesn't only eat small fish. The reality of survival is a massive, interconnected network of dependencies. Just take a look at this masterful map of the wild. On the left side, we see our plant eaters from earlier, the deer, the rabbit, and the grasshopper, all drawing their energy from the plants at the bottom. But follow those arrows. The rabbit might be eaten by a wildcat, or, it might be eaten by a fox. The grasshopper might be eaten by a small bird, which in turn might be scooped up by an eagle or an owl. The deer might fall prey to a tiger.
It looks like total chaos, but it is actually a beautifully structured web. Every single arrow represents energy moving, sustaining life, and linking creatures together that might never even interact directly. I mean, think about it. The tiger relies on the plants not because it eats them, but because it eats the deer that eats the plants. It's amazing.
Section 3. Ecosystems everywhere.
Now, we have spent all our time so far looking at burrows, ponds, and forests. But this massive interconnected web of survival, it is definitely not just limited to the land. Let's compare what we've learned. On land, we have the chains we just explored, plants providing for the deer, the rabbit, or the grasshopper. But beneath the waves, the sea has its own incredibly complex food relationships that follow the exact same rules of coexistence. Small fishes are eaten by sardines, and those sardines are hunted by sharks. The players change. The environment completely shifts from dry land to the deep ocean, but the foundational law of nature remains absolute. Every organism is a link in a chain, and every chain is woven into a web, literally no matter where you are on planet Earth.
Which brings us to our final and perhaps most important thought for today. We've established that living beings depend heavily on one another for food. The web is tightly woven. So I want to leave you with this question. What happens to the web if just one link disappears? Imagine if a disease wipes out all the small fishes. What happens to the frog, the large fish, the crane, the sardine, and the shark? I really want you to deeply consider the fragile balance of this natural world we've explored today. The chain of life is strong, for sure, but it relies completely on every single connection. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep observing, and I'll catch you next time.